Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper and independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! And today I have for you a very fun card. It might look a little bit unassuming from the front, but when you open it up, you get a big wow with the pop-out birthday cake. So I'm calling this my birthday cake pop-out card, and I'm going to teach you how to make it. The first thing you will need for your card is a piece of cardstock for your base, which is 8.5 by 5.5. You will need a paper trimmer and a scoring board or a scoring tool of some kind to put this together. So the first thing you're going to do is on your 8.5-inch side of paper, score your base at 4 1/4, just like you would be making a regular card. And then you can set that to the side. And then you will need a piece of basic white, and this is 8 1/4 by 5 1/4, just a little bit smaller than your base. And you will need to score this at 4 1/8 on that 8 1/4 inch side. Now I'm going to show you how to make the inside of the card and the cuts we need to do to form the cake. So take your piece of basic white with your fold in the middle. I'm going to fold it in half and make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to take it and turn it so the fold is at the top. And you might want to write down the directions. I'm going to try to put them in the comments for the video so that you can see them. We are going to position the paper first at 1 1/4 inches, and then move your cutting blade to the top. Before you do anything, move your cutting blade to the top because we're going to cut down from that fold. So go ahead and close that. So we've got it lined up in 1 1/4 inches, and we're going to cut down 1 inch. So to do it, I'm going to look at my hash marks here on the side of my cutting blade and my measurement markings here on the right side of my cutting arm. Now, if you don't have a paper trimmer and you're really bummed out, it's okay, don't worry. You could measure down with scissors for each of these measurements, or you could use an X-Acto knife. So it would be a little bit different, but you can actually do it, so don't worry. Don't be discouraged. So 1 1/4 inch here, cut down 1 inch. And what I like to do is I like to hold my paper up with the extra thickness. It wants to move down a little bit with your scoring or your cutting blade. So I kind of try to keep a finger on it to push it up towards the top. And I also press down a little bit more than I typically do because we're cutting through 2 layers of thickness. So I'm going to push down and cut to the 1 inch mark. And it's going to take me a little longer than it will take you, only because I'm trying not to hit my head on my camera while I talk. So I cut down once and went back up, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just, without pressing really hard, I'm just going to slide my cutting blade back down and back up. And that way I'm sort of ensuring that I'm cutting through both layers. So I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to slide this over to 2 inches, and I'm going to cut down 1 1/4 inches. So these cutting marks are 3/4 inch apart. Now I'm going to slide over to 2 3/4 and cut down 1.5 inches. Slide over to 3.5 and cut down to 1 3/4 inch. And then last but not least, slide over to 4 1/4, and again, this time we're going to slide down or cut down to 1 3/4. And for this one, I look at both measurements. I look at the 1 3/4 inches on the right, but I also make sure I'm even with my cut line on this left side, because we're making the bottom of the cake, and obviously you don't want a crooked layer. So I try to even it up and make sure it's even on both sides. Now lift up your cutting arm and go ahead and take your paper out. And so you will be left with a piece that has these 5 cut lines. So you can kind of see how our cake is going to come together. Now I recommend a scoreboard for this next piece, but again, you could use the scoring tool on your paper trimmer. This just is a little bit easier, I find. but there are ways to do it. Take your stylus, and what we're going to do is just make a score line straight down between the layers of the cake. So I'm going to take my short line here at the top, my top line, find the ridge underneath, and just pull straight down. Not all the way through, just to that next cut line below. Basically, I'm outlining the layers of cake. And this is going to help with folding when I put the cake together. So I've done all the right side, now I'm going to come to the left and repeat. Sometimes the trickiest part is finding the ridge for your score line. So just go ahead and make your score lines for all those layers of cake, and then once those are done, you can put your scoreboard away too. Now, one little tip, and I keep forgetting to do this, you may want to do your stamping on the inside of your cake, or the inside of your insert first in case you mess up. That way you don't have to redo all your cut lines, so we're just going to cross our fingers that this works out. I am using for this card, for the inside, the Best Year stamp set, the Happy Birthday to You greeting, and the Wishing You Your Best Year Yet. And then for the front of the card, I am using the Snailed It stamp set and the Happy Mail enclosed. I'm not really going with the snail theme, just using the Happy Mail stamp to coordinate with the Designer Series paper, which is also from the Snail Suite. So I'm going to take some Bermuda Bay ink and hope that my stamping comes out well here, since I forgot to do it first. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment, one on each side. You could keep it simple with one sentiment. It's totally up to you how you want to design your card. So there's my Happy Birthday to You. And Wishing You Your Best Year Yet is going on this side. And lucky me, that turned out well. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a minute before I start to decorate my cake. I'm going to decorate the front of my card. So go ahead and fold your cardstock as you would a regular card. I have a piece of Designer Series paper that is 5 1/4 by 4. This is all from the Snail DSP, and I'm just going to glue this to the front of the card. I pulled all the colors from this card from the cardstock. And I'm just going to use some adhesive here. You can decorate the front of your card as simply or as fancy as you like. So there's my piece of Designer Series paper. Now what I'm going to do is take my rectangular postage punch and add some accents. So I have Basic White, which we'll get to in a minute, Real Red, and Bermuda Bay again. And I'm just going to take my punch and punch one rectangle postage stamp out of each scrap of paper. So there's the Bermuda Bay, here is the Real Red. Before I punch on my Basic White though, I'm going to use my last stamp, the Happy Mail enclosed. This is such a fun little stamp. And there we go, all my stamping is done. I'm gonna put my ink pad out of the way. And I love our dye-based inks because they dry so quickly. I can already go ahead and punch my last rectangle here. Let me line that up a little better. There we go. It's easier to decorate the front of your card before you glue the insert in. Otherwise it gets a little fussy. So I'm going to glue the colored rectangles on flat. And then I'm going to add the white rectangle punch with dimensionals. So as I said, you can decorate this however you like. Now I need to find my dimensionals here. And then put this on the front of the card. And then I'll show you the cute little way I'm going to embellish just a little bit here on the front of the card. We have some adorable resin hearts embellishments that coordinate with the snail set. These are available till the end of June 2021. So I'm going to use one of the red hearts, and I'm using my Take Your Pick tool because it helps me lift my little embellishments off. And I'm going to use one red one on the Bermuda Bay, and then so they stand out, I'm going to use some of the white ones on the real red piece. I just thought these were fun little accents to go with this card. And I'll come back and use a couple of those on the inside. So now once you've got your front decorated, we can move back to the inside. What I like to do first is I have to do a little convincing to get my card to do what I want it to do here, because all these pieces want to fold naturally down and you want the cake pieces to pop up. So my first step is you don't want to manhandle this too much, but go ahead and just pinch a little bit on your score lines for the sides of the cake and press them down, because this is going to help convince those layers to move the way you want them to move. So go ahead and pinch those, and then what you're going to do is fold the card insert itself down, but pop these cake layers up with your fingers, and as you start to bend, they're going to bend naturally on these score lines since you encouraged it a little bit. And then when you fold it closed, press it down, give it a really good press. You can use a bone folder if you want, but be careful you don't catch any of these edges and tear all your hard work. And so you're going to be left with a piece like this so you can see the outline of your cake. And then when you open it, you can see how your cake is formed. So all we need to do is decorate our layers. And we're going to do that with some Designer Series paper pieces. This is a great way to use scraps. And to save my tabletop, since I'm working with these narrow scraps, I'm going to bring over my silicone mat. This way any glue will stick to my mat and not my tabletop. So for the top of the cake, and you can work in any order you like, I tend to work from the top down. I'm going to take a piece of paper. These are all 3/4 of an inch tall, and this one is 2 inches wide. And I'm going to fold it with the back side of the paper together. And that way my score line will be going in the same direction as my cake layer. Just fold it in half. I'm going to go ahead and fold all these at the same time. The next layer is going to be 3/4 of an inch by 2.5 inches wide. And the third layer there is 3.25 by 3 inches wide. And last but not least, our last layer is 3/4 of an inch tall by 3.5 inches wide. And I will post the measurements as I mentioned earlier. Or you can pop over to my Facebook channel, which is The Faithful Stamper, and find the measurements there in a post earlier today. Now I'm going to glue these pieces on my cake. So as I said, I'm using my silicone mat in case my glue gets away from me. You could use liquid glue for this if you like. I know that can be easier sometimes if your adhesive is a little difficult to work with, like mine sometimes is. Now what I'm going to do is come over and start gluing these to my cake layers. And I like to make sure they're level or even with the bottom. So if there's any excess, it's going to be on the top side. That way the cake will just function the way you want it to. So line up your edge. Your score line should line up in the middle. And you're ready to go ahead and decorate. So bear with me as I glue all these on. So there's the second one. And you're not tied solely to direct or to Designer Series paper. You could use all layers of cardstock if you wanted. Or you could stamp cardstock and put it on if you wanted a design that you might not have Designer Series paper for. Or you can even emboss your cardstock. I'm going to show you a sample in just a minute with some embossed cardstock. So one last layer to go. Thankfully my glue didn't get too out of hand. So there we go. My cake is now complete. I give that a good press to make sure those papers aren't going anywhere. And then what I like to do is go ahead and refold your cake, because since these pieces are now a little thicker, it helps when you want to close it. So go ahead and just fold it again like you did before and give it a good press so that you've got good crease lines on your cake. And there we go. So now we're going to put the insert inside our card. And I have a way that I recommend you do it. You can go ahead and flip it over, and for this I use tear and tape. What I like to do is take my tear and tape and I put one long piece along each edge, of each of the shorter edges I should specify. And then we're going to come back and add a couple other pieces. So there's the long edges. And then what I like to do, I take a longer piece and just tear it in two. And I'm going to put a piece on the top and the bottom of each half, and I'm going to edge a little bit towards the middle. And that way this insert is tacked down in all the right spaces, and it won't pull away from the card when your recipient goes to open it. So flip that around. Give that a good press. Now we're ready to put it inside the card. Make sure you've got your card front the right way and your insert the right way. You definitely don't want to do all this work and then glue it in your card upside down. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold the card in here. I'm going to take my Take Your Pick tool and lift the backing off my tear and tape. Which is not cooperating this evening. There we go. Oop, just stuck my hand in the tape. There we go. Now, so position your insert with whatever side you've got the tape backing still on, put that down flat. And I recommend just about putting the center of this insert right on the score line for the card base. That way it's going to be right where you want it to be. So I've got my borders nicely around the edges. I've got it lined up on the middle. I'm going to hold it in place with my right hand and go ahead and fold it closed. Give it a good press. And now I can see I've got it in where I want it. And I recommend it doing this way rather than try to glue the whole thing in at one time. I tried that on an earlier card and I ended up with a wrinkle on my cardstock. And obviously you don't want to send this beautiful pop-up card to anyone with a great big wrinkle on it. So I just found assembling it this way works a little bit better. And it just helps you make sure it's flat. All right, last piece of tape. I'm going to spin that back around, and again just hold your insert flat with one hand and then go ahead, close and smooth, and now you have your birthday cake card. Now of course every cake needs a topper, so I'm going to take some more of the resin hearts that we used on the front. For this one I'm going to use the red hearts, and I am simply going to stick them that cooperate to the cardstock right above this top layer. And I thought this way they kind of just looked like sweet little toppers. Oop. All right. I love this Take Your Pick tool because I can nudge my hearts back where I want them, since they're not being most cooperative tonight. I try to get them even on both sides. You can be creative with what you put on the top of your cake. So there is your birthday cake pop-up card. And if your layers want to pop back down like that, use your fingers to just pop them up, or grab your Take Your Pick tool or a bone folder and just encourage them to come back up. And then here is your birthday cake pop-up card ready to go. Now I do recommend, if you want to mail this, you will need extra postage. It's a little bit thicker because of the decoration on the front and the pop-up on the inside. Now I have just a few other samples to show you. I mentioned a moment ago that you can use embossed cardstock on your cards. This is a floral design using our hand-penned petal suite that is in our new 2021 to 2022 annual catalog. If you don't have a demonstrator you're currently working with, I'd be happy to get you a copy of the catalog. Just reach out and let me know. And here on the inside, I used embossed cardstock for one of the layers, and then I used a stamped image that I fussy cut and just popped on the top of the cake layer with glue dots. And you can see here I just used one sentiment and then added some stamped accents, which I repeated on the envelope. And then this kind of card is great if you have a special occasion. My nephew is turning 16 next week, and so I wanted to send a card. So I created this one. I used the Party Puffin stamp set, but I didn't use the actual puffins. I just used the candles and the sentiments. And I wanted to make this a manly looking card. So I used all black and white designer series paper from our special host designer series paper pack. And then I used our playful alphabet, which has numbers in it as well, and cut out the 16. And I used that for the topper, and I just used a little bit of glue right on the backs of the letter, their numbers on the bottom. And once they were set, now I have a perfectly lovely birthday card. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the birthday cake pop-out card. I would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, press that subscribe button, and I'd love it if you also hopped over to Facebook and found me at The Faithful Stamper. I do crafting videos 2 nights a week. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy crafting!